The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Mark Cranack is on assignment. We are going to be checking in with Cranack from time to time from the dugout of a youth baseball game. We'll see if we can pull this off. We were in Saratoga Springs yesterday with the Pride of Fairbury, Bill Dolman, coming to us live trackside from the Belmont, as he is on a dude's road trip. Cranack has got the lineup card presumably in his back pocket, and he's ready to go, which is awesome. It's weird this summer not doing as many Saturday shows from various parts of the state with travel baseball. Elijah, you look fit and healthy this morning. How was the movie last night? We'll dive into some Friday Night Lights reaction. A lot of campers last night that had to move indoors with the storm moving through. We'll talk some quarterback tiers as ESPN's put out their list. 4 different tiers of quarterbacks in college football, and already some waves and reaction with the promise of a Dylan Raiola for Nebraska football. Brandon Vogel, Counter Reed, going to be with us in about 10 minutes. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Sharpie will check in and talk some ball with us as well.
Yeah, so you laid it out first by asking the question, how was the movie last night? Godzilla -1 on Netflix. I've been waiting to watch this one for a while. I've been waiting for it to come out on streaming. I'll preface it. For a Godzilla movie, it was very, very good. Was it the most highbrow piece of cinema I've ever seen? Definitely not. For a Godzilla, though, movie, it was very good. It was better than anything the American counterparts have put out in a long time. It isn't fully in Japanese, so you have to be good at reading subcaptions. If that's not your thing, then it's not a movie for you. But that being said, it was a fun spin on Godzilla, and I quite enjoyed it. Pretty slow Friday night for me besides that. Ate too many chips and guac. We talked about that on the show yesterday, and I grabbed some guac before I went home. So, yeah, that's left me feeling just like 5 out of 10 today. Whenever you have too much guac and you got like a little bit of pressure going on in the gut, like that's a lot of guac, honestly. But other than that, feeling good. Got my coffee rolling, and I'm ready to talk some Husker football. Do we have an update though, quickly, on Friday Night Lights camp last night with all the rain that came through? Do we know what went down with that? I haven't seen any updates.
Mitch texted a dear friend whose son was performing there, and a lot of the attention, and I mean, all the kids got attention first and foremost. Just looking at some of my notes here. One thing that this dad told me is that the coaches aren't just, there in physical person. Yeah, they're in attendance. It's a camp, but they're there working. I mean, every assistant on Rule's staff, and that's what this parent told me, was like they are up close and personal, giving pointers, talking ball and technique. And even with Rule, he's not he's not distracted or just putting in FaceTime. They are there. There's communication. There's interaction. The money is well invested by folks when they send their kids to Nebraska. That's what the gist I got. So it's a real camp. You've camped and camped in high school when you were at Southeast, and you probably had different camp experiences. I think one camp that you still smile about, correct me if I'm wrong, was just how good the Iowa State camp was for you, just because of that interactive factor.
Yes,
interaction factor.
And one thing about Iowa State, too, I think camps are better when they're in pads. I know that's not how some camps are designed to be. Friday Night Lights has that combine element of things as well. And we had that at Iowa State, and really hands-on with coaches, a lot of players getting out there at Iowa State as well, getting hands-on with the high school athletes. Just that was one of the best camps I've been to, just because, as you said, kind of the one-on-one hands-on instruction that you got from coaches. You didn't quite get that at Nebraska. Even some of the smaller colleges in the area provided really, really good one-on-one instruction. I didn't necessarily feel that for Nebraska's camp. This was back in the Mike Riley era. We're talking 2016, so different era completely. But like whenever I hear what a Friday Night Lights camp is like now, with the one-on-one instruction from all the different coaches, making sure guys get in there and learn something beneficial. That's kind of one of the things I brought up on the show yesterday whenever we were chatting with Brian Christopherson. Is I think a lot of people look at the camp circuit and they think of it as like, well, it's about Nebraska trying to go out and find its next crop of athletes. And it is. Don't get me wrong. But it's also about giving back to area athletes that are going to be playing on Friday nights this fall and saying, hey, by raising the level of competition across all levels in high school in Nebraska, I guess varsity, but you know what I'm saying, A and B and C of the different classes, if we get the entire level raised, it's going to benefit Nebraska someday. So I really like whenever you hear the stories of these high school athletes going off to camp, getting the proper instruction, one-on-one with some of the high-level coaches that you have at the University of Nebraska. That's what a camp is all about, because there's people like me who are going to go into radio someday or business or whatnot, and they're not going to get recruited. And it's nice to hear that those guys are also getting the same level of instruction that those guys that are running a 4.5 40 are whenever they're going off getting offers and getting looks from coaches. These camps aren't just for them. It's also for some other guys too. And from the middling high school athlete in me that I was back in the day, it's nice to hear that the camping experience is for everybody at Nebraska.
No, that is awesome. You want to have treatment and attention, your money spends the same, right? Despite the star and projection level. Let's shout out our stars this morning, and that is the starting five. And the StreamYard, as always, can catch and watch the show Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. Also, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Like and subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the podcast. Give us some feedback. And Facebook and Twitter with KFOR. The other Brian is in first. Good to have you. NASCAR Eric checks in. Tuck says, let's have a day. Tuck, love it. And Tuck's wondering about the commitment level of some of the listeners. He's like, we should have like 30 people in here by now. Everyone must be hungover. Maybe some folks didn't watch Godzilla. I took my wife to an Italian restaurant last night. I went tortellini a la vodka with sausage and chicken. It was incredible. And we'll just leave it at that. Michael from North Carolina. Michael, good to have you back in. Moonbot is here, says, howdy, nerds. Pretty good stuff. Rick is in. Rick, thank you for checking in. Black Hills Brennan. Brennan, good to have you back and in. And I know it's getting to be that time, Brennan, so kudos to you. We'll say hi to Curtis. Curtis, good to check in with you this morning. And Kevin way down in Texas is with us. He's headed to the CWS next Friday. Kevin, next Friday, we will be at Zipline in downtown Omaha, not far from the Chuck. So swing on by, Kevin. Be good to see you. We're there 4 to 6. Kevin will be in Omaha for the CWS, and he wants some good Omaha eats, some dives. We will get Mr. Sharp on that for us, as he's our Omaha resident. So there we go. Cliff, good to have you in. Cliff got 7 racks of baby backs on the grill. That sounds incredible.
Is that an exaggeration, or why do you need 7 racks of ribs?
Because you can, I guess, is...
7's that's a lot.
Because you can. William is in. Ryan is in. Buck 380 is in. Good to have you, Buck. So just a couple of names to think about for this first session of Friday Night Light camps. Katori Marion is a name that's out there. He's a 5'11", 170-pound receiver from Alabama. He is the brother of Jamari Butler. But Qatari made a pretty good impression. He's a 2026 wide receiver that is super just quick, agile, athletic, all sorts of shake and bake, and a guy that kind of wowed some folks at camp. And also you have Marion Jackson. He's one of those Millard South players that there's a whole bunch of Millard South kids that were camping yesterday. He's a 2026 wide receiver as well. More and more folks, and I've got a handful of folks that have kids playing skill position, and they just really like Garrett McGuire. He coaches hard. He's super fair, super direct, connects well with the kids, and that's just another kind of caveat from last night when just getting a quick text message. One name that's out there for 2026 that's now at Omaha West Side that was at Lincoln North Star is Mo Purify II. So,
oh, that makes me feel old.
Yeah, well, you I remember when talking to Mo and when he got signed in that recruiting class from San Francisco Community College. That was a Ted Gilmore special, man, that he brought Mo in. And I think there was some sort of relation to Bobby Purify from Colorado when Ted was there. So that's pretty cool. So,
and he's a North Star kid, is that correct?
Now at West Side.
Now at West Side, okay.
But was it North Star? He's a guy that is 6'4", just like Dad, and really is somebody to look at. And Westside is so good and so talent rich. That's just another guy that is finding his way to Westside, which is super impressive. Mount Millard South tight end Isaac Jensen at 6'6", looked pretty good, and you've got a loaded squad for sure. With Millard South. So those are just some of the names from a couple of folks that were in attendance last night, the wide receivers. But Nebraska does camp right. They do a fantastic job. John checks in. My sister and brothers-in-law are at Belmont today. Who you got? Also, I lived in Edmonton. So rooting interest in the Stanley Cup, Edmonton or Florida. I think Edmonton would be kind of fun. Their fan base seems to have a hell of a good time, Elijah, when they are cheering on their Oilers.
That's not the only thing you care about. Get your mind out of the gutter.
No, it's not the only thing I care about.
Can I say it's been 31 years, I think, since a Canadian team last won the Cup, and without
which is crazy.
Losing, I don't want to lose my red-blooded American Patriot card here, but it'd be good for a Canadian team to win the Cup again. Just because it's been so long and because Canadians are so passionate about hockey, it's wild you have to go back to the early 90s for the last time a Canadian team took home Lord Stanley. So I think I'm rooting for Edmonton. Also, Connor McDavid, just so much fun to watch. I'm an Avs guy. I love watching Nathan McKinnon, and I'll always stand up for him as being one of the best players in hockey, but you can't watch Connor McDavid not see the brilliance. So he's really fun to watch. It'd be good to see him get a cup too. For Canada, for Connor McDavid, I think I'm rooting for Edmonton. But I'm just rooting for a good series, I guess we'll say. That's my cop-out answer if you don't like me rooting for a Canadian team.
Cliff is got a family baby shower / housewarming party. That's why there's 7 baby back racks on the grill. Ross has a very good point here in the stream. Did you see the Lamborghinis rolled out for the Texas unofficial visit weekend? I'm all for kids getting theirs. That's a bridge too far. Michael Terry III on his visit to Texas posted on social media all the Lamborghinis. If we could, we would roll out a Lamborghini for one Brandon Vogel for every Saturday morning appearance. I would hope that would make up for lack of back pay on our end. counterread.com as Vogues checks in. Vogues, it is all sorts of Texas flash for a five-star stud out of San Antonio. Brandon, when it comes to official or unofficial visits, what car would you have chosen to be wowed by? Or is that anything that you would have even fathomed?
No, it's nothing I would have fathomed, and I've never really been a car guy. It was a long time ago. I'm trying to think of what junior in high school Brandon Vogel would have wanted in terms of car.
Camaro,
coming up.
Corvette,
No,
Hummer.
no, probably not. I mean, a Hummer might have been
Bronco?
close. Like, today's Brandon, like if you rolled up a like vintage 1986 Bronco or something along those lines, I'd be pretty into that. But at this point, I'd probably just take something German and something, relatively. give me a BMW or a Benz, and I'll be fine with that. Like I don't need a supercar. Let's put it.
Give me something German. You're not happy with the 6'7" offensive tackle this week?
Ah, what a transition.
That's a pretty crazy story. Like it was just and I'll be interested to learn more about it. I was just looking around at his Instagram feed. Like he was in Germany like 12 days ago. He got his first offer from D2 West Texas A&M like 6 days ago. And then all of a sudden Nebraska's like, are you in? Like, we're ready. We're buying, but let's do it now. And all of a sudden, like, he's going to enroll at Nebraska as soon as possible. I mean, I think it's going to take a couple of weeks, but wild story for a 22-year-old who's 6'7", 250. Like, I know he's a defensive lineman technically / tight end, but when you're 6'7" and you have athleticism, like if they can put the weight on you, I'm thinking offensive tackle. So we'll see.
Well, what's wild to me is like you look at he's 6'7", 260, and he still has a six pack, and I'm like, dear God, some people just get the genetics, and I guess he's worked hard for it. Don't get me wrong, but like, man, it's not fair.
I mean, it's just like, and it's just wild. I mean, we see it happening more and more. Nebraska made another offer to a kid who happens to be from Germany, but you look at Gridiron Imports, the people that kind of brought him over and bring a lot of people over to get these opportunities, and you see people from all over Norway, Austria. Like it's kind of crazy that guys are over there playing. And yeah, if you're an elite athlete, you're an elite athlete. And in a lot of ways, I think some of those international guys who typically play, I mean, they're trying to play American football in places where it's very nascent. So they grow up playing a lot of sports, which if you talk to Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook, you'll find plenty of people who tell you the importance of just playing a lot of sports. A lot of different movements, a lot of different things, kind of an anti-specialization track. And that tends to be the case for those guys who are coming over from Europe in increasingly large numbers to play college football.
And we've seen this, I guess, in the sport of baseball within the past 20 years, where its international explosion has really helped out the game of MLB, in my opinion, where, I mean, your biggest star in the world right now is Shohei Ohtani. And that kind of comes, and I know Japan's always been popular with baseball, but there's been an explosion of Japanese players coming over to the United States in the past 20 years. You also look at South and Central America sending players up and how it's just improved the sport as a whole. You see that with, I guess, the NFL too, where they're going and playing games in England and Germany and this year Brazil, and there's been a lot made of the Brazilian game this year because they're playing in a home stadium where the rival team is green, and it's a mortal sin to wear green in that city, and they book two teams that their primary color is green, which I think is kind of funny. Classic NFL there. But what do you make of the untapped potential of the international markets of football as being a potential advantage for college football teams and college football coaches such as Matt Rule?
Well, I think it fits with kind of their domestic recruiting policy, I guess we can call it, in terms of like they're going to look at kind of a guy's measurables, and that's part of the value of these camps. Is like you get to do your own measuring. So you do that, and if a guy kind of whatever your metrics say is like, oh, this might be an elite athlete. Like, they're not afraid. And Hofken is a good example this week to say, like, yeah, we're in, let's do it. And we've seen it in past recruiting classes with, some probably under recruited or undervalued prospects where they see something they like in terms of track time or maybe their own measurements. And we're like, okay, this is good raw material. And we're confident enough in our coaching and development ability to mold it into what we think it can be, what we see from just, some of the raw numbers. So I think it suits Nebraska pretty well. That said, if you're, and like, I don't want to pretend like Georgia or Ohio State, they just shop at Erewhon and don't have to develop, because they do. I mean, those are good coaching staffs too, but it's just, it's different, the amount that they need to do that when, your name kind of gets you in on the top 50 or so recruits in the country if you want to offer them.
Brennan Vogel with us from Counterread, counterread.com. It's interesting just in the global world of sport where it started, and you have the pro leagues now are sending teams and have been over. I mean, you have a couple of games in Germany this year with the NFL. There's been games in Britain. There is a game in Mexico. So they're trying to grow the game globally there. Big emphasis years back with the NBA, with Yao Ming and getting into China. And you look at the NBA draft, and there are fewer and fewer kids going top 5, top 10 compared to the international flair. And the reason for that is you go over to Germany, or you go over to China, or you go over to pick somewhere across the pond, their development structure is way different. And I'm not knocking AAU, because you got talent, but it's let's play 40 games. In Europe, it's let's have 40 practices per game, and then you get a game. So it's flipped a little bit, and you're getting super high level of development.
And what's wild is, like, you look at, like, the major sports in America. We talked about Shohei Ohtani in baseball, but, like, in the NBA, you mentioned it. Luka Doncic, international. Nikola Jokic, international. Victor Wembanyama, international. Giannis Antetokounmpo, international. Like, the sports that are tapping into the international markets and getting that international flair in their league are improving because of it, because you're getting an untapped market of, like, the NBA in the 90s. I know Schmidt loved it. It was great, but, like, this talent that you're bringing over just raises the league standard, because instead of looking at the American population for your talent, you're looking at a global population for your talent, and that only leads to more talent, which I think is really interesting to see the NFL now moving into that. And you can expect, I think, college football to kind of follow suit and get more talent that way. I'm really intrigued by what international markets can bring to football.
Well, and our dear friend Mike Leach, he would do clinics not only in New Zealand, but he had done clinics in Germany and France, and, a kind of a world traveler the Pirate was. I mean, every summer, the Pirate would be somewhere else doing a football clinic and just kind of doing his thing, hanging out. So, I mean, go where they're not, right? And then hope you get this pipeline of super highly developed, fundamentally sound kids that show up to your campus day one, and maybe you can cut out some of that baking time of development before they're ready to get on the field. Easier said than done, right? But pretty interesting what's going on, and I love what Nebraska's doing. And is it Brett Popplewell, the last international guy for Nebraska? Was he a wingback from Australia?
Nuruddin Nueli? Nuruddin?
Oh, well, yeah, duh. Forgive me there. But
he did play high school football in America, though, so it's...
Right. And Popplewell probably did too, but that's going back. You remember the name, don't you, Vogel? The wingback?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Speaking of going where they're not, Mike Leach, 1989, Finland. That's where they're not. for football. Head coach there for a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly backs that up. It's interesting. Like, I don't know enough, and this would be something worth researching for a future story about what it's like to play, well, particularly football over there. But it just seems, you're looking for elite athleticism, like wherever it is, whether you're in Alabama, North Dakota, Montana, or Germany, Norway, etc. And guys, there's going to be people who are just elite athletes everywhere. Maybe the difference that we're seeing, and kind of do not be alarmed NBA into this too a little bit, is like, I just wonder if, like, now if you're an elite athlete in the U.S., you get identified so early, and if you're playing a sport that's not soccer, internationally, I wonder if that happens, because it's like, well, you guys probably know somebody who was like really into rugby, right? Which totally cool, like rugby as a sport, but like, that's the closest equivalent I can maybe come up with to what it would be like in the U.S. It's like you're playing something that isn't really played at a high level here, but that doesn't mean you might just be an elite rugby player who happens to be American. Speaking of which, U.S. cricket team tearing it up in the World Cup. Anyway, too far afield.
And that's been funny because there's been a lot of discourse on Twitter this week about cricket versus baseball and what sport is more challenging to play, what's more impressive, and it's just funny, after all that, the United States goes and beats one of the best teams in the world, so that's a win. But you kind of mentioned, I was pulling it up, and I apologize for those on the stream. I absolutely blew their eardrums out as I was trying to find the YouTube page. There's a guy, I'm not sure if he still works for Barstool, he may have used to work for Barstool. Juan Tondon is the name he goes by. He went and coached the Ugandan national team in football and did a whole YouTube series about it, and it's really interesting to see kind of, not just Europe, not just wherever. Going to Africa and coaching a football team and seeing that, there's football fans in Uganda as well, is really interesting to me to go and follow. And their team was not very advanced football by any means. I don't think there was any college football players or future college football players on that team, but still a fun series to go and watch them coach the Uganda national team and kind of try to help improve the sport there. Very, very interesting series. I just thought it was fun to throw that in there. I recommend that if you want to see how football is growing overseas. It's also funny to see these Ugandans who've never really played football try to figure it out.
Brendan Vogel with us, Counter Read, counterread.com. Vogues, what are your stories this week on Counter Read? It was FPI and Nebraska projections here. What's your vibe, your feel with Nebraska, and what did the data tell you? And can you project anything? And FPI is a bigger look, right? A playoff look, but from a Big Ten standpoint, what were some of the other items of interest or intel you got? I'm just trying to figure out where Nebraska can place as we're in June in this Big Ten race, this new Big Ten race that I think is going to be a lot of fun. And the schedule has been deemed doable compared to some past years, but it still doesn't look easy, but it's a hell of a lot better than Georgia's schedule.
Yeah. Or Purdue, trying to remember who else ranked up there in terms of the Big Ten and toughest schedules. FPI, like, broadly, so Nebraska was 41st in that, which is about where they're kicking around in most preseason kind of power ratings. And so that was 9th in the Big Ten, which is about where their odds, like their conference title odds, would put Nebraska. I think one of the takeaways I had is that the group in the middle, like the middle 6 teams in an 18-team league, really tight. Like, you'll find some other places that have Iowa higher, Wisconsin higher, but so Iowa is the top of that middle 6 teams to basically Nebraska. There's only barely more than 2 points in terms of FPI ratings separating them. meaning that if you took Iowa, and I think Rutgers is at the bottom of that group of 6, like on a neutral field, Iowa would be favored by like 2.5, maybe. So that's interesting. So when you look at Nebraska in terms of trying to figure out where they can fall in the big scheme in terms of the Big Ten, like it's going to be about those games. It's going to be about Iowa. It's going to be about Wisconsin, UCLA, Rutgers. Those are kind of the toss-ups. I think those are Nebraska's peers based on FPI rating for this year. And Nebraska's fortunate. Maryland's in that group. Nebraska doesn't play Maryland, but it gets UCLA at home. It gets Rutgers at home. It gets Wisconsin at home. In terms of the schedule, I think it's built for Nebraska to have a little bit of momentum, which it hasn't had. Matt Rule's out here talking all the time about, they haven't started 1-0 since 2016 or 2019. So that's a pretty big deal. So we'll see how that goes. FPI was higher on UTEP, which, we're talking about 125th in SP Plus versus 111th. I think Nebraska is still pretty comfortable in that game. The big change was Colorado. Like FPI is pretty high on Colorado, has them ahead of Nebraska, ahead of Iowa, based on these initial rankings, which I have a hard time seeing, but who knows? So still that opportunity exists. We talked a little bit about it on Thursday, but Nebraska's toughest Big Ten games are on the road. And when you're in this spot for Nebraska, like it's bad if you're Penn State and trying to compete for a playoff spot, like considered a playoff favorite, maybe / contender. 1 or 2 losses can be the difference between that season being a disappointment and meeting expectations. For Nebraska, like I don't think anybody's penciling in 10-2 or anything at this point. So having those toughest games on the road, I think is a good thing. It becomes then a question of, can you take care of business at home in a lot of toss-up games? And you got to like your chances to do that at home. But it's been a while since we've seen Nebraska do it.
Brendan, I had a tweet sent to me this week. It's from Dave Bartu. He works for Matrix Analytical about the ease of schedule. I'm not sure if you've seen this or not, but he posted up his ease of schedule rankings, which essentially accounts for a team's 5-year rolling recruiting average compared to their opponent's 5-year recruiting average. Nebraska finds themselves in the top 20 along with the likes of the teams that you'd expect to be out recruiting their opponents, the Notre Dames, Ohio States, Oregons, Alabamas, Penn States of the world. Nebraska finds themselves in that top 20 because they are, from a 5-year rolling recruiting average standpoint, better on paper than at least 9 of their opponents this season. Does that mean anything to you in year 2 of the Matt Rule build, considering there has been some weirdness, transfer portal departures, a coaching staff change? Does it mean anything to you that Nebraska finds themselves in the top 20 of this ease of schedule rankings for 2024?
I mean, I think it should mean something. It's where you'd rather be. You'd rather be there than be in the bottom 20, which might be an obvious statement. But for, myself, but also I think for a lot of Husker fans out there, like there's good reason to be a little bit skeptical of that, because that's kind of been the case, maybe not top 20, but it's kind of been the case for the past 5-6 seasons. You can look at Nebraska and use the data we have, which are recruiting rankings in terms of kind of assessing roster talent on a broad scale. And they were always one of the most talented teams in the Big Ten West anyway. Haven't beat Wisconsin in 10 years, beat Iowa once in 10 years. So it's still the case of like, yes, the pieces are there for Nebraska, I think, in terms of how they compare to kind of their most immediate teams that they need to jump over to have something better. They just haven't done it. So is this going to be the year? I have a little bit more confidence in it based on, I think, what we've seen from the coaching staff. But you're still just kind of projecting. And for those people who are like, I don't want to hear it, like, don't talk to me about this stuff until we start winning some games, like, I get it. That makes complete sense.
Brandon Vogel with us here, Saturday morning edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. And those toss-up games are going to be so important because they just haven't gone Nebraska's way forever. Back to your point about seeing is believing for some in the fan base. And it's really a healthy year. That's what's part of this excitement level for a lot of the fans. Not only do you get the stud quarterback, you've got a track record of success with your coach. You've got dudes on this coaching staff that are just I mean, they don't know how to do anything else but grind, and you like that. You feel like their evaluations at a high level, and then you put all that together, and then you have a chance to go, as Matt Rule would say, go earn it. With a little bit of momentum, helping some wind behind you push forward as you start out at home. Because I think it's going to be a knife fight against Rutgers because they played pretty good ball last year, and Shiano's got things going. Not to build Rutgers up to be Bama, I'm not doing that. But Iowa and Wisconsin, it feels like the fan base believes you should, on a given year, split with them. Well, you've been being swept by them every year, it feels like, with the exception of that first year, right? You just haven't been able to get Wisconsin. And then with that middle six, UCLA, I can see where Colorado may figure it out and be better this year because they've got a lot of skill. They give Shedeur any time to throw. But with UCLA, despite their departures, there's still some dudes over there. So is Nebraska's schedule harder than it looks, or what's your read on it, I guess is the best way to put it?
I mean, it's hard to say if it's harder than it looks. That's part of this is like, we can look at it from afar and say, well, this is what we think Purdue is going to be. Well, here's a better example. Indiana. They're showing up last in all of these power rankings in the Big Ten. And fair enough. That said, I really like their coaching staff. Like, they brought in a ton of guys from James Madison, which is a winning program, guys who are used to this coaching staff first, but also like what it takes to win. That's one of those games. So when I initially went through Nebraska's schedule, I kind of identified three what I thought were swing games. And I went with at Purdue, because it was at the first road game, UCLA in kind of that middle section, and then Wisconsin at home. Of that group, like, and that was, a month ago, like, I now kind of think maybe Rutgers is more that game of that first stretch. Although Colorado is big too. Like, I have a hard time. Like, you could tell me Colorado's going to go 8-4. You could tell me they're going to go 4-8. And I'd be like, yeah, I can see that. We just don't know at this point. Like, Nebraska loses that one. I think mentally, it's a tough one. So you could put that in the group. But I think that UCLA one is still there. Nebraska is basically a year ahead in terms of it made a coaching change a year ago. So it should be a little bit further ahead than UCLA is just on that trajectory. So that's one of those games where I'm like, Nebraska shows up as kind of a toss-up in this one, but I think they should be like a relatively decent favorite. They get that game at home, and we'll see. And Wisconsin, I think I would still have that one in there too, because the Badgers are a team that I think has a pretty wide range of potential outcomes. I'm not quite sure what to make of Wisconsin.
Vogues, what is coming up from you this week, bud, with Counter Read? How can folks check in with Counter Read, counterread.com? You and Aaron Sorensen, great stuff each week.
Yeah, you can just head to that website. We do two subscriber exclusive newsletters a week. We also do another free piece or two during the week, and you can sign up for free and get those free ones. Read those for a while, see what you think. But plenty of recruiting. Obviously, it was Friday night, the first Friday Night Lights last night. June's a big recruiting month. I kind of wrote about that a little bit this week, about how in the past, it's been important because your commits in June. I think mid-May to like mid-July, which includes all of June, of course, is a bit of a sweet spot for recruits. I think they have a lot of information. I think they can make informed decisions then. And it showed at Nebraska in the past in terms of those were the guys who tended to stick around for 4 years. So we'll see going forward if that remains the case. But pretty important recruiting bug. I'm also working on some kind of long-term projects. I really want to, I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition, but I really want to figure out a way to determine value of the chances teams are creating through down and distance, et cetera, and what that means in terms of kind of projecting teams going forward. So that's been a little bit of a long-term project, but I feel like I'm getting close to something. So we'll look for that. I can't promise it next week, but should be coming soon. Definitely this summer.
I love that. At Vogues, make sure that you find out those teams that live in 3rd and 3, all right, and how they perform. We'll check in with you next week. Always appreciate you, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
There he is. Brandon Vogel with us. We turn to the Iron Horse, Mr. Gary Sharp. Sharpie, what's up, dude?
Uh-oh. Gary might be with us.
Yeah, well, we see him.
I saw him going double birds on us in the he cannot hear us. Okay, we're going to try to figure this one out real quick.
We're going to fix this here. Gary Sharp has his mic muted. It's still muted.
And we can hear him.
I can't hear him.
Well, he hasn't been talking, so.
Okay.
And there's still no audio. Let's see here.
Cliff is asking where the bucket hat. Now I'm echoing.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm working on some things behind the scenes here.
You're fine. Burnwaw is asking. Listener Kevin from Texas is coming up to Omaha, Sharpie. So he needs to know some pretty good dive spots to go to in Omaha.
He still can't hear us. So let's try. Oh, man. This is no good. Let's try this here. And let's have Gary rejoin us, maybe.
Okay. We will see if Crew is screaming at you. Figure it out, Elijah. Crew, he's doing his best. Sharpie may go grab the bucket hat, and away we go. So
Gary was going double birds on us in the green room, so.
Well, we kind of earned that. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be incredible, and that's a hell of a development. So thanks for asking that question.
Check the podcast out if you want to know what we asked.
I love the old the tried and true solution of turn it off and back on again is still the solution that tends to work best with technology. Gary leaves the studio, he comes back, and everything's fixed. I'm going to take credit for it, though.
There we go. I need to get your take, Sharpie, the tour guide of Omaha for the College World Series, my friend.
Don't.
And where do you advise a Nebraska fan coming up from Texas, giving Kevin the shout out here, heading to the CWS next Friday? What are some good Omaha eats? I prefer dives. And take it away. We'll be at Zipline 4 to 6 throughout the CWS, which is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, we've been doing that for years, which is great.
I would stop over to see you, but we're a little busy at that time. Yes. First and foremost, I would do Block 16.
Okay.
You know, everybody's going to stop by and see what the Jello Shot Challenge looks like this year. Sad LSU fans will not be here. You know, there's a lot of stuff around the ballpark that is local, but I would you got to venture a little bit away from the ballpark to find like some really good food. Like go into the old market. Block 16's at 16th and Farnham. You know, there are people that own places that are friends of mine, so I don't want to single anybody out. But you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong. I was downtown yesterday, and the tents are up, so we're getting close, and we could have 4 teams already punch their ticket today.
And one thing to note here, if you'd like some Omaha Eat suggestions, can't recommend Dan Hoppin and his podcast Restaurant Hoppin. He's got a website as well, and he's affiliated with us with Hurrdat, so you can check out his website Restaurant Hoppin. That's with an EHOPPEN, referring to his last name. He has a full list, all of his Omaha restaurant rankings. He goes really in depth with all of them. I think he's been just about everywhere in Omaha, so if you want some restaurant suggestions, Restaurant Hoppin', it's wherever I go whenever I'm looking for an Omaha Eat spot. So that is my my free shout out for the day. But he's a colleague with us with Hurrdat. So
he's still 160 pounds, which
I know, which is amazing. I know. He is an absolute bean.
He's still playing weight from his days at Lincoln High.
Looking at the weather forecast, bring your sunscreen. It's gonna be hot. It's gonna be, well, you know what? It's gonna be like June in Nebraska. Sure. But before we go any further, as you just mentioned, Lincoln High, can we give a shout out to Darius Huff?
Yes.
I mean, Lincoln High representing in the NCAA Track and Field Championship when a Nebraska-born trackster wins the 110 high hurdles.
Pretty awesome.
Mean, not just one; he was blazing.
13 something, right?
Does that automatically make him the male athlete of the year at Nebraska?
Good.
9th fastest time in NCAA history.
Yeah, it's incredible. He is, we've kind of followed him when he was in high school to his time now at Nebraska. And, track and field is very successful in Nebraska, but it doesn't get a lot of attention because I don't think we have enough media that understand track and field. Except when you run fast in the Olympics and you run the 100 or the 400, or a football player goes and is in the Olympics. But Nebraska track and field, men and women, have been really, really good for a long time. And especially of late, you had the javelin thrower the day before who did, amazing things. And then Darius last night. It's a heck of an accomplishment. It's pretty damn cool that Nebraska has a Nebraska kid, and we know high school track and field is big here. Look at the 4-day run at Burke. To have him win, I hope that gets the right amount of attention and respect nationally and locally.
And
which I think locally it will.
And you talked to Otibor, the javelin throwers. Crushed the NCAA record. That thing went. I'm not great at transferring meters to yards and feet. But it was
like, wouldn't be good in Canada.
200 plus feet she threw that thing. I think it was like 214 or something like that, which if you do the quick math, that'd be like starting at the goal line and throwing it to the other like 35-yard line, a javelin. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. So 2 great performances from the Huskers at the NCAA championships in track and field.
Like, I'm always very interested in the javelin throwers because at what point in your career do you say, you know what, I want to throw the javelin? I want to do a field event that throwing the shot looks a little bit unorthodox. I will just throw the javelin. And then, like, does your father or your mother, like, do they help you? Do they stand at the other end and you're trying to avoid getting hit by the javelin?
No fair catching, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like the one skill that's really translated from being a Roman legionnaire into modern culture. Like being able to throw a javelin 70 yards.
With accuracy.
Like, she would have been extremely valuable back in the day. If we're talking like Roman, Greek times, like those legionnaire captains would have been like, holy cow, she can absolutely rip
five star. Think
about it. If you were, I'm sure, like a baseball player might make a good javelin thrower. But as a kid, like you always picked up rocks and you would throw them at things, like you'd try and hit a tree a ways away, or, you'd throw it into the lake or the river or whatever. I wonder if, instead of picking up the rock, you just like, I could throw the javelin. Mm-hmm. These are questions that they're very pertinent on Sunday or Saturday morning.
You get a the broom handle, and that's how you get started. I guess. I don't know. The Iron Horse with us, Gary Sharpie. Marines still do that thing in battle, which is good.
So Cliff, with anything in battle. Cliff, our former Marine, chimes in.
Yeah, I love it. So Friday Night Lights last night. We've had some international flair this week with Hoofkin. You've got Parker committing a top 100 back. And Sharpie, before we talk Friday Night Lights and that Millard South contingent, I want to get your take. You've seen recruiting for a lot of years, and we touched on it this week as well. Just how advantageous it could be for Nebraska to get back into Missouri. We talked about it with the Parker commitment about, all right, we kind of reeled off all the Missouri kids that came to Lincoln. And the last Missouri kid, when Nebraska was in their, golden era, that they missed out on or they didn't get was Justin Smith. Remember him that went to Cincinnati first rounder? But other than that, Nebraska got a ton of dudes, a ton of guys from Missouri, and then it just went away. So good for Nebraska to get a kid out of St. Louis. I know Ohio State's lived there quite a bit and done well, and so have some other programs. But can this be a thing for Nebraska, or is it just going to be sporadic? What's your level of commitment / emphasis for Nebraska and Missouri?
Now, you're right, Schmidt. Nebraska used to be really successful in St. Louis because they were in the Big 12 and they were winning. And whether it be Dan Alexander, and most recently after Parker committed the other day, I thought, wow, Trey Bryant. I went back and looked at Trey Bryant's career because he was out of St. Louis, and when he came, you were like, whoa, this could be the running back. And then he had just chronic knee issues. Here's the thing about let me pose this question, both of you, and then I'll answer what you said, Schmidt, because this might frame how we look at this. Was it more important the other day for Nebraska to get a running back that you went, yeah, that's a guy they don't have in the current room, or to get a guy from St. Louis?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it was more important to get a kid from St. Louis. Just now the style of Parker. I mean, just my comp for him was Mo Washington. Mm-hmm. I think Elijah's comp is better. You said who again?
I said Donovan Edwards from Michigan.
Donovan Edwards, just from a body type standpoint.
I like the Donovan Edwards.
Donovan's is way better than Mo. That was a better comp. So if you can get that style and that production, then amen. The production's great. But I think it's just important to go get a win down there in St. Louis, in the state of Missouri, especially with, the kid was good enough to be offered by Bama. The kid was, an Arkansas commit, and other schools went in. So to go win that battle, go head-to-head, toe-to-toe, is impressive. So I'm going region versus style, because I think Nebraska moving forward will just find the backs they want, and I think they're going to have a 1-2-3 attack based on what they're running. Third down back, heavy personnel back, and then your first and second down guys. So I think Nebraska, again, positionless, right? This guy also fits into that.
Well, and I think, Gary, the question that you asked kind of goes hand in hand with each other, because I think to Ja'Cory Barney, and there were kids from the Florida area that were at the spring game that were wild, saying, man, I played against this guy last year, and in 3 months at Nebraska, he already looks like a different and better player now that he's out on the field. And he's kind of in that same mold of a guy that Nebraska didn't quite have somebody like him. And whenever you're able to take that, improve it slightly, and show the Florida kids, hey, here's what we've done with him in 3 months, it left an impression. I think it's kind of the same question with Parker of like, if you can come into the program and fill that role that nobody else fills, get on the field quickly and show that development quickly, that's something other St. Louis kids can then look at and say, hey, Matt Rule and his
the advertisement
have done it with a St. Louis kid. That's a good spot for me. Yeah. So it kind of goes hand in hand of like, the recruiting win is big, yes, but it's more important, what does he do once he shows up at Nebraska to be that advertisement for St. Louis in the future? But if he fills that role that we think he can, of being a guy that steps in and can at least show other recruits, hey, Matt Rule's developed me, Matt Rule has a plan for me, and I'm going to get on the field. That's whenever the advertisement to St. Louis becomes a little bit more valuable.
So I'm going with the running back. And, it looks like moving forward, this offense will be a 3 running back attack. But you have to have an all Big Ten running back type to get to where you want to go. And I like him a lot. I think this is a great pickup for Nebraska. I think he is. I don't like dilly-dallier running backs. When they get the ball handed off to him, they sit there and they survey. I want a guy that puts his foot in the ground and takes off. And I look at the film of Parker, and, he's played some high-level competition. So it's not like he's playing against lower level guys in the St. Louis area. He's playing at a higher level, and I really like the film. I think this is a great pickup for Nebraska, and I think it kind of there's a lot of elements to this pickup that you cannot overlook. One is Nebraska wasn't in his final 7. So Nebraska, in a short amount of time, led by Rob Dvorak and then E.J. Barthel and the whole offensive staff, they made up a lot of ground to quickly establish a relationship and a trust. Because that's another thing I hear from players in the St. Louis area is they see so many different faces that are wearing Nebraska polos, they don't know who to trust. Because it has been a revolving door of late of who's going down there to recruit. But under Rule, they've been pretty solid and consistent with who they have going into St. Louis. So you quickly build a relationship, you gain that trust, you show them the vision, you get them on campus, and then you reel them in. My only thing, and I'm not saying that Parker will be like Lacey, who ironically decommitted from Nebraska, decommitted and ended up at Mizzou. I love Quan Lacey. And it was about this time last year that he committed. I thought, that's the guy. Nebraska has a 3-down back guy, a guy that could be a potential All-Big Ten, but they couldn't hold on to him. That's the thing is now, can they hold on to him? Because people will go, whoa, if Nebraska liked him, what were we missing? And they try and get back in there. So, you wait until December, but I think they've got a nice little base of, okay, he committed, he's strong with his commitment, he's going to stay here. So they get the running back part, which I really, really like. The St. Louis part is interesting because of going in there. We almost talk ourselves into the ground around here about, Nebraska's got to get back into St. Louis. They got to get back into St. Louis. And Nebraska has tried, but was it the right approach? Even a guy like Kenny Wilhite, who is well known in St. Louis, who knows where Ted's Custard is and Emo's Pizza, and he's been up into the little capsule that goes into the Gateway Arch, and for some reason he's a Cardinal fan, but he couldn't get momentum out of the city of St. Louis and the surrounding area. But I like how Nebraska has approached it, because they've approached it as a team. And look at last year, they made an inroad. Remember Ryan Wingo, the 5-star wide receiver? Yeah. Nebraska got in late on him and kind of started to walk down the path, but it was a little bit late. He ended up going to Texas because you remember the drama on signing day. He slept in and people are like, did Nebraska just flip him? But if Nebraska can win in St. Louis before they win on the field, I think that says a lot, because here's one thing you're up against. Smitty, you started this question off by saying, yeah, Michigan's gone in there. Remember, Ezekiel Elliott is from St. Louis. Urban Meyer went in there early in his tenure at Ohio State. Everybody is in St. Louis. Then you have on one side a Big Ten school. Then on the other side, which is more of a factor for Nebraska, you have an SEC school that is on the rise. Mizzou is a top 10 preseason team. Eli Drinkwitz is recruiting like crazy. He's going into St. Louis and he's grabbing Burden and those kind of players out of there. I think what hurt Nebraska is Nebraska went to the Big Ten. Mizzou went to the SEC. It's easier to sell Missouri in the SEC than it is Nebraska in the Big Ten initially, with an in-state school where also, don't forget, Nebraska has had great success in the state of Missouri. The Wistroms, the Rutgers, they bookended both states. What would be really great here in the month of June, and this shows you a lot about the recruiting efforts of Nebraska as they're grinding. You could bookend the Show Me State with a pickup by Parker, and then on the other side of the state, a pickup with Merritt, the linebacker who is at Alabama this weekend, who I still feel pretty confident that he'll end up at Nebraska. I mean, it could be a pretty great start in year number 2 in the state of Missouri.
Real quick on the Missouri part and the Tigers not only beating Ohio State in the bowl game, really showing out this year under Drink, but think about that lasting impression Missouri made once they transitioned. Sharpie, they went to 2 straight SEC championship games.
Yep.
And they came in on fire versus Nebraska was expected to be in the Big Ten championship game. They went the second year, but it was a much tougher transition. Missouri fell off a little bit. They settled with Drink, but he's killing it there. He is absolutely killing it. It is a state that has always been very ripe with high-level talent. But now you've got, of course, Illinois farmed there for a lot of years. Urban picked his spots. To your point, Michigan and Missouri. But now you even got Leipold in Kansas and Oklahoma too. Yeah. So good luck. Good luck getting a hotel.
Well, look at Lovie Smith tried to hire every key high school coach in St. Louis to come join his staff. you got to give them a reason. Kids in that area, because they hear so many different things from so many schools that go through there, you got to give them a reason why they should say yes to your program. And if Nebraska can make some inroads in that city, in that area without winning yet, man, that shows you a little bit behind the scenes of Nebraska's recruiting effort. So that was a big pickup and twofold, kind of wrapping this up on the question of more important to get the running back or St. Louis. And probably at the end of the day, you say both.
Well, can I ask you the question, Gary, with everybody trying to get into Missouri and especially St. Louis? I mean, it's a saturated market. Tennessee, Missouri, Nebraska, Arkansas, the who's who of college football. Could you make the argument that going and getting Hufken out of Germany could be valuable in the long run as well, trying to tap into the untapped international market of college football?
Well, I think that's a good question, because the group that he is with, I don't know if you'd call it an agency. They're going to produce some Division I football players, so it starts a little pipeline. We've kind of seen through the history of Nebraska football recruiting that when they get one and they come to Lincoln and they pan out, you're going to get that second one. So you start that pipeline to a particular area or a particular school. That's why it's also important, and I always say this about Omaha kids. We know how much Nebraska wants Omaha kids to stay home. But the Omaha kids got to go to Lincoln and ball out. They can't just go to Lincoln and be on the roster. Because if they go to Lincoln and they ball out, they're very well known in this area by the younger kids. And they're like, I want to be just like him. So that's why it's important. Like a guy like Nick Hendrich had a good career at Nebraska, or some of these other Omaha guys like a Jalen Lloyd. Jalen Lloyd is a Pied Piper in this town. With the Boys and Girls Club in North Omaha, everybody knows him. All the younger players know him. And if he goes to Lincoln and does what he's on the path to do, balls out, that just continues. Oh, man, I want to be the next Jalen Lloyd because he went to Nebraska and he did this. I think it's important for not only to get a player, but he's got to come to your school and you got to take care of him. They got to have a good experience, and then they got to ball out. That's why one big thing that happened during the spring is that the Florida kids came here, and the Florida kids look like they're being developed, and they had a good time. What are they going to do when they were back home for that brief period in South Florida between the end of school and the start of summer conditioning? They said, man, Nebraska's where it's at. So then you have boots on the ground that actually wear the uniform that are recruiting for you as well.
Gary Sharp's with us, the Iron Horse, weekend edition of Hail Varsity. What's your feel, and we'll get to some Ethan Nation questions here in the stream in a moment, but Jalen Williams, what's your feel there? I know the kid out of Palatine, Illinois, Michigan's where he's at this weekend. Nebraska's made a good push, but we've talked, I don't know, about a month ago about Nebraska's need or wants on the interior defensive line. And Williams is a guy Nebraska's been pursuing quite heavy.
It's, if, again, Nebraska is a relatively new staff. Well, they are new. They're 5-7 with a lot of momentum, and you're ending up on lists for guys like him. It says a lot. It says a lot about the operation. Rule's a grinder, and he's if you don't know him, I think it would be tough initially to work for him because he's a grinder, man. Because he's always trying to push. And I think because of their effort, they're in on these guys. Now the next step is reeling in these guys. And I don't have a great feel for what Williams will do, but it is, man, it does. You do stop and you go, whoa, Nebraska's logo is on that Final Four. Compared to, recent history, should they be? Should Nebraska be beating Alabama? And right now you would look at the, side by side and go, no. But it shows you their effort in recruiting, and you can do the effort. They need a win. I think they're going to get a couple of wins here in the month of June, but they need those kind of wins, more of those to stack up before you start playing football in the fall, 12 Saturdays from now. And you can then go, yeah, we are getting guys in recruiting off a 5-7 season. Now we've got 7-8 wins, and we've got momentum. What can you do for us? And then you go from where Nebraska football has perennially been a top 25 recruiting program. Then you're serious about, man, could they touch being a 12 to 15 ranked recruiting program?
We talked about that yesterday. Where does Nebraska need to live? in the teens, in the top 30. You've got your tiers, and your top fours seem to always be your top fours, where they're getting a plethora of 4- and 5-star talent. What are they doing with that talent?
But
you got another coaching change at A&M that just have squandered. Texas seems to be
watch out for Mike Elko, though.
He'll be good.
They have an adult running that program.
And my question with the top four is, how does that change as the college football playoff expands into 12? Because it's been the top four has been, hey, you want to go to a college football playoff, you come to our school. And that's been those consistent top fours. I wonder how the top of the recruiting rankings can change with the college football playoff era expanding. If you can say, hey, our 15th ranked recruiting class or 10th, yeah, we can't compete dollar for dollar, like for like with Ohio State, but we can still take you to a college football playoff and get you into the first round. I wonder if that ends up diluting, I guess, where some of the top talent in the country goes. And speaking of top talent, Gary, a quick question here on Michael Terry. And Michael Terry's folks. I know Nebraska finds themselves in the top 4, and that's one of those guys that, I mean, from an outside perspective, I think Nebraska feels good. There's still a long battle, and I think a good start to the season in the fall is going to help with that one. But that's like the first name I think about when I think of a guy that, you know what, in a new college football playoff era, if he sees something from Nebraska this year, it might be one of those guys that I think could be more flippable from a top talent.
You hope that moving forward, because look at, regardless of who the head coach has been in Nebraska football should be inside of the top 25 every year in recruiting. And for the most part, they have. We get concerned when they're 26, 27, 28, regardless of how large the class is. We go, whoa, what's going on? Can Nebraska use the Big Ten to help them in recruiting? Because as there is, what you alluded to, Elijah, the separation of the Big Two, there's going to be opportunities that are at hand being in the Big Ten. Whether it be you're 9-3 competing against a 9-3 ACC team or a Big 12, I think the committee's going to look closer at that Big 10 team. Can you use that advantage of being in the Big 10? And then can you use the advantage of being in the Big 10 when it comes to recruiting? So you're beating a Big 12 school on the road, or you're beating an ACC school on the road, or a middle-of-the-pack SEC school. That's the next phase of, okay, we've been in the Big 10 long enough. Sometimes we fought it and said, it just doesn't seem. Now it's good to be in the Big 10. Can we stay in the Big 10? And then how can we use the Big 10 to make us better?
Sharpie, a thought on Ethan Nation, as he's no longer listed on the roster, a guy that was in the mix for some PT at that quarter spot, punt return. Nebraska is going to keep on bringing dudes in. Every day is a competition.
I just don't think he can find a home, anything consistent. I don't think he consistently could have gotten on the field. And, you're right. You know what the competition is around you. And I'm not saying that he backed away from the competition. I just think that he could not find a consistent where he could be on the field, and it probably was a challenge for him. And there's a better place for him. And, Nebraska moves forward. I was intrigued by him, and I thought he would initially get on the field as a return man and then work his way into more playing time in the defensive backfield. Because if you look, they're bottom heavy in the defensive backfield. They're not as much experience at the top end, and he's a guy that's at least been on the field. So I'm not going to say it's a loss that's going to hurt you, because the one thing that's the one position group which I have a concern about coming into this year, but I don't have a concern about the guy that's running the room. Yeah. I think if you go, yeah, what about that safety spot? What about the opposite cornerback spot? What are they going to do with Hartsock? You go, well, they got Coop coaching back there. They're going to be fine. And then you look at some of the young kids that were here in the spring that looked like they were coached up and didn't have the deer in the headlights look. They're going to be fine in the defensive backfield. I think it might be rocky at the beginning of the year, but I'm very interested to see some of the younger guys, whether they be Boodle or even a true freshman, if they're able to touch the field sooner than later.
Well, that's one of the things I kind of discussed, just depth, whenever we were having our discussion earlier this week on the show about Nebraska's floor in 2024. And could it be 8-4 was kind of our discussion point. And what makes me say no is the depth at some areas that concerns me. I look at the tackle position on offense, quarterback on offense. Defensively, linebacker's a spot, but I also look in the defensive back room as well. Are you concerned about the depth of the defensive back room? Should a guy like Bly Hill not be 100% when he comes back from injury? Or should a guy like Singleton, God forbid, get re-injured? Are you concerned about depth in the defensive back room at all?
I would be if Hill would have gotten injured, let's say in camp in August.
Right.
But, I don't want this to come off as sounding harsh, but when he got injured, it actually could benefit Nebraska because now they've gotten to see guys during spring and they got to coach some guys up because you don't know when Hill's going to be back. And I don't think they're going to rush him back. It's kind of like the Buford thing. They won't put him back on the field until he is fully set to play and he's not going to re-injure himself. They're going to have some young guys. That's what, like, you see like a Barnes. I'm going to use him as an example. And Boodle's a dude. Dwight Boodle Jr. is going to be a guy. They got some guys coached up, and they will coach. They've been able to coach themselves into some options. But what it does, it puts the onuses on. We can't have a lot of Tommy Hill experiences. You got a lot of great Tommy Hill, but then you got that 1 or 2 plays a game where you went, what the heck? But then he would turn around and make a big play, and you're like, we're back, baby. But you need, but what really it comes down to, because Hill will be fine, and he could be in the running for some all-conference honors. It seem like as we get closer to the season and bringing Singleton back into the conversation of, man, you want that guy to be healthy because we need to see what we thought we were going to see in the fall when NFL was attached to his name by his head coach, is Malcolm Hartzog has to figure things out early this year. Where he's going to be a cornerback or a safety, now with the situation with Bly Hill, Malcolm Hartzog needs to be back to the Malcolm Hartzog as a freshman because he was lost last year. And that was a really, really concerning development in the defensive back room.
Gary, to further elaborate on this question, where are you concerned about depth in this Husker football team? Where in fall camp does Nebraska need to focus on building depth if they want to be successful? Because the Big Ten's rough and tumble, injuries are going to happen.
I would say offensive tackle and then in the defensive backfield.
Okay,
cornerback and safety.
So I nailed it. Elijah Herbel. Plus
two spots for sure. Sharpie will wind it down, and it's always good to get caught up with you on the weekend.
Hey, can I add something here? This is because this is on my mind. Elijah referred to the floor and the ceiling, and I think we've all done this. What the floor and the ceiling is for Nebraska football moving forward, and there's a ton of excitement, and there's a really good vibe, and there's the check of the schedule, there's the check of the quarterback. There's the realization last year they had this great defense. If they would have had competent quarterback play, would have been bowling. Program still hasn't won 8 games in 8 years. Hasn't been to a bowl game since 16, but there's a lot of love for Nebraska. We talk about the floor and the ceiling. What do you think the fan expectation is?
I think the fan expectation is to come out and look like a squad, right? They want to see the eye test. They want to see minimal turnovers. They want to see the continued tackling and flying to the football. It was, you bump into Nebraska fans at some of the road venues we were at. They were tough losses, a lot of them. Colorado, Michigan State, just to name a couple. Yeah. But they love how the defense played. They love the effort, right? They love the effort. I think when you see competent football with tackling and being able to run the football on 3rd and short and this guy's open, get the pass to him, get the ball to him, right? Take care of the football. Don't throw a back-breaking interception. All those things go into what you could have as your ceiling and also puts a pretty high floor up there for you. So to me, it's how does it look, and can they handle some of these end game situations where they are the team that makes the play or is able to get that first down and keep grinding clock, or gets the stop on 3rd and 8. They want to see those things, and all those things translate into, an 8-win football team, a 7-win football team, or better. I mean, there's some folks in the stream that look at the schedule, look at the talent, look at Rule and say, damn it, it's 9 or better. I mean, so I think you'll see it against Colorado. And how do they handle the moments, Gary, right? They handle some of those moments, or they learn from some moments for later on in November.
To me, and can I just jump in on this real fast?
Yeah.
To me, it's like people say bowl game or 7 wins or improvement. What Nebraska fans want to see Nebraska beat the teams that Nebraska should beat. That's what I think the simple fact of the matter is. You look at a schedule. UTEP. Colorado, I think there'd be some forgiveness if you lose to Colorado, but you still think you should beat Colorado. So I'm gonna put that as one, okay? So 2. Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. That's 7 right there. Teams that you as Nebraska should be beating with the resources and the fans that you have. You look later in the season, Ohio State, okay, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. If you can look passable and win a couple of those games, Husker fans will be happy. But the simple fact of the matter is Husker fans say bowling, and you go bowling if you beat the teams that you as Nebraska should be beating in a year in, year out basis. And that's what I think
as the year goes on, too.
That's what the basis
stronger.
expectation is, yeah.
Yeah, you see a lot of, Nebraska could start 7-0, but man, they might finish 7-5. That'd be a major letdown.
Yeah, it would.
I agree with you, Elijah, because this was kind of a step last year of you started to beat teams that you live in your neighborhood. That the Illinois and the Purdue's and the Northwestern schools that are kind of right around where you are right now. And once you beat those teams, you can move out of the neighborhood and see who else is out, on the block that you can go up and beat. I think they also need to start winning home games. They have to be good at home. And that has been choppy along the way. But, it's 7 or 8 wins. There's my looking at this season, and I think they're better than they walk. They have a better football program. They have a better roster from the last time they played football in Memorial Stadium. Whatever they do this year, which must include a trip to a bowl game and momentum, sets up next year, is how I'm looking at this year. And I know, you're only supposed to take it 1 week at a time, and we don't know if we're even going to be around for 2025. I think a good year this year sets up a big year for 2025 when you look at the roster on how it's set up, and also you would be really starting to pick up a lot of momentum along the way. But I will give you this little nugget. So friend of mine whose son plays at Nebraska, who has a significant role. He is not a defensive back, by the way. He is on the other side of the ball. So I saw him in their little break between the end of school and conditioning. And I said, so how is it? And he goes, I like what we're doing. Like, he was very, very, like, we got something here. You're not going to hear us talking about it, but we got something here. And I thought about my conversation I had with him, and he's going to play a lot of football coming up in the fall. And he said, we are in a really, really good place. Better than we've been since I've been here. And he's in his, 4th year in the program. Mm-hmm. But just to back up what he told me is internally, they really like what they have. They're further ahead than they thought they would be. And to reiterate the point of where they like where they're at after spring, they got after them in the first week of summer conditioning. Like, they are taking guys to the limit early and challenging them because they feel like they are on the cusp of a very special season. And they don't want guys to be lax. And so they're pushing and pushing and pushing and going to take guys over the next 6 weeks to places that they haven't been just to get them ready for this season, because they feel like this is a season that was maybe next year that they feel is going to happen sooner because of the intangibles inside, and then when they get on the field, what they have. And I thought that was kind of something I'm gonna think about a lot as the season rolls along.
Gary, to kind of go along with that, you said something that I kind of like, that Nebraska needs to beat the teams that's in its neighborhood. Do you see this as an opportunity to move out of the neighborhood this season with the kind of feeling internally with the way the schedule sets up? This takes me back to the article by Tom Chattel, Slumming in the Big Ten West, which gained a lot of traction among Big Ten West teams last year. But I think that is truly a little bit how Husker fans feel, that the neighborhood that they have been living in is not the neighborhood that Nebraska should be living in.
Correct. But you did it. But did you did it to yourself?
I guess what is the neighborhood, and is there an opportunity for Nebraska to move out of that neighborhood this year?
I think Nebraska could make it to Tier 2 of the Big Ten this year. If you think Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State are in Tier 1, and then the tier between 1 and 2, USC is trying to find a home, I think you could be in Tier 2. I think right now, if you could get to a point in 2024 where Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska are all kind of interchangeable. Mm-hmm. They'll have kind of similar programs, similar talent. similar coaching, and they're, you wake up in the offseason and you go, we got 8. How do we figure out to get that 9th and 10th win? I think that's where you could live. But I think Nebraska can make it to the second tier of the Big Ten. And in my tier world, there's 4 tiers. And if you could do that where you're legitimately considered the 5th, 6th, 7th best team in the Big Ten, I think for right now you would take that.
You get there and then keep going George Jefferson, and you get to 5, maybe you make a jump to 4, you're in that top 4. That top 4 is playoff consideration.
Yeah, the other thing I'm pretty confident in this, and watching how Rule has rolled all this out, is if this is a breakthrough year, I don't expect a step back. Like you might get to a level where 8 is, okay, we know we're going to win 8. How do we win 2 or 3 more? That once they get a place, they're going to continue to grind to try and take the next jump instead of, oh my gosh, kind of like Scott did when you look at the 2019 season. They were like, let's just get to this point in 2019 and then we'll figure out 2020. Well, the world changed in 2020 and 2019 went down the toilet after the trip to Boulder. That if they get it to a spot, they're not going to yo-yo. They're not going to take a step back. They'll just continue to maintain that level if it's a tier 2 and then try and figure out how to get to tier 1. So that's why 2024 with Nebraska football is one of the most fascinating seasons we've had in a long time, because it could go a bunch of different ways. But I think whatever happens in 2024 sets the baseline for what happens in the future in Nebraska football.
It's your launching point, potentially.
And remember, there is more pressure from the outside of people that control checkbooks on Matt Rule to win than there ever has been on a football coach at Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Because if you win, money comes. It used to be money would come and then go win some games. Now it's if you win some games, money will come. So Matt, go out and, get us to a bowl game and have a good season.
Make it enjoyable, right? Feels good to give, said Bob Devaney.
Well, I mean, everybody knows what the current landscape is and the finances come into play. If you feel good about something and you like where it's going, you maybe have never donated to an NIL or donated for a stadium project or bought a premium seat. You're going to think twice about, I want to be involved in this. I want to get in now. And that's kind of what they would like to do instead of, in the past it's been, oh man, I'm from Nebraska. I'm a Nebraska fan. I'm going to be involved. Now people are looking for the return on investment. If you can give them a return on investment this year, then I think you're in a good spot.
Gary, while we're
and everybody understands that landscape too. It's not like the football coach is going, no, I just want to coach ball. Yeah, he knows if you win at Nebraska, there's a ton of benefits in the meantime and in the future.
Gary, while we're talking money here, a little bit of a less serious question to get you out. Advertising on the field, do you think Nebraska puts any down? And if they start 2-0, do you put the Kool-Aid man at the 50-yard line?
Okay, I said this on my show yesterday. So this will be the 25th year that I've owned at least a season ticket in Memorial Stadium. If they remove the N from the middle of the field in Memorial Stadium, I'm done. And I think there would be lots of people that would be lined up behind me. And I think they would run the athletic director out of Lincoln, and they would run that business out of business in the state of Nebraska if there was a corporate logo in the middle of the field. I'm okay with this, though. If you wanted to put something on the 25 and the 25, I can live with that. But don't you ever touch the N in the middle of the field, okay? Don't touch Nebraska or Huskers in the end zone. Don't ever do that. But if you need to put 2 logos on the field, I get it. I understand it.
What if you have Netflix, but it's smaller little letters? You keep the red N.
No.
I got to ask it.
No. When I turn on a game and I look at Memorial Stadium and I see, hypothetical, I'm just going to use them because they are a partner of Nebraska, and a big F&BO logo.
Yeah.
Okay. No. I can handle logos on our basketball court, but what would be the reaction at PBA? They take off the state of Nebraska logo in the middle of the floor and they put a big F&BO or Pinnacle Bank logo right there. Wouldn't we be like,
the state stays.
Well, in Schmidt, even a couple weeks ago, you brought up the idea of naming rights for Memorial Stadium. Hell no. That's me.
Yeah.
Never. It's not FNBO Stadium. It's Memorial Stadium. That's another thing that I will put my foot down on. No naming rights for Memorial Stadium.
What may make this a moot point in terms of having a bowl game type colorful logo at the middle of Memorial Stadium? Wouldn't that be awful hard to maintain on a grass field?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because it's going to go grass.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Memorial Stadium is going grass.
Yep. Which will be all good.
How soon?
Love that. 2 years.
I will say within a couple of years. When they figure out what they're going to do with the sideline, the west sideline, in terms of spacing, then I think they make a move on the field.
Also be curious to see what type of technology they employ to keep that grass green through the month of November. There's a lot of great grass growing techniques, not to go full dad on you. I'm talking like they roll in like the overnight UV lights with heaters to keep the field warm. Like there's some crazy technology out there for like high level soccer and football stadiums out there to make sure the grass stays green year round. You don't get that ugly patch like the NFL does where it's arrowhead in December and just absolutely dead through the middle hashes. I'll be curious to see what type of technology they employ, and I think all the dads in the state will be as well to take some notes on their front lawn.
Lambeau Field is okay.
Yeah, they do a great job.
Yeah.
It's heated. Sharpie, enjoy your weekend, man. We'll run you down. Appreciate you much.
Thank you, guys. Always enjoy the conversation. Have a great weekend, everybody.
There he is, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp with us, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, Kranak in the dugout and coaching away. So we'll check in with him next Saturday. Like and subscribe to Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio, and KFOR Facebook and Twitter as well.
And we hope to have Mark next week. He sent us a text and brought up the idea. I kind of agree with him here that probably a bad idea to have him join from the dugout while he is coaching, yes. So
screaming.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of complications that came with that. We're excited. Mark Kranak should be back with us next week.
Back on assignment. We'll be back at you Monday at 4 with Hail Varsity. Thanks for tuning in.